go ahead and get everybody seated and get started. Can y'all hear me in the back of the room all right? I'm going to get Isaac and Reverend Mitchell to come up here to the front of the room. We started about 12 years ago meeting over next door at the old sanctuary, Bill Saunders and myself, and we started meeting over here with several members of the community on Johns Island, and we've been so thankful we have this beautiful facility that the church has to be able to meet in. It's a great facility, and Reverend Mitchell and her parishioners allow us to come here, and we thank y'all so much. Before we get started, I'd like to ask one of y'all to give us an invocation. Do you hear? Would you like to, or like Isaac? Or?
First of all, welcome, and we want to thank the concerned citizens for all that they do. You're always welcome here, and we're glad that you're here tonight. And we have welcomed the mayor and his wife. Let us pray. Dear gracious and almighty God, we come once again to thank you. Thank you for all that you do, all that you have done, and all that you will do. We give you recent thanks for bringing little Heidi home. We thank you for all the prayers that have gone up. We thank you for the concerned citizens of this community that come together. We thank you for the leadership of Mayor Tecklenburg and all that is done as we come together as a team, a people of God. So we come together tonight hoping that as we have conversation, that we continue to better this community so that we are doing things that are pleasing in your sight, that you strengthen us, that you direct us by the power of the Holy Spirit. We ask all these things in your mighty and majestic name. Amen.
Amen.
At this time, I'd like Bill Saunders to come up here and introduce the mayor. Before we get started, the mayor and some of his staff are going to tell us a little bit about what's going on in Johns Island, then we're going to open it up for questioning. Bill's a real stickler about getting out here at 8 o'clock and everybody going home and getting home in a decent hour, so we're going to keep it on time tonight, but we're going to open it up for questions. If you want to ask a question when the mayor finishes, raise your hands and we'll bring a microphone to you. And if you talk loud, you don't even have to have the microphone. At this time, and Bill's going to get mad at me because he usually does, I'd like to introduce Mr. Bill Saunders. The ones of y'all that don't know him, Bill is quite a legend here on Johns Island. He's born and raised here on Johns Island. I think he's been here except for the short time that he went to, he kind of told a little fib and went to Korea at 16 years old and got wounded and then came back here and started fighting a real fight then for civil rights. And one of the reasons why so many have the rights that they do in Charleston today is because of this gentleman. I have been watching on the news some of the reports of the weather in Korea and seeing how cold it is there. It just amazes me every day what this generation did there, and we should thank them every day. And we appreciate it. Bill?
Thank you, Thomas. One of my worst problems is that I don't know how to act when somebody says something nice about me. I'm prepared to fight. But when you start doing nice stuff, I don't know what to do. Thomas just did that a while ago. But it's really, really an honor to let him look very proud of it. That when you can be a part of it, I get thrown into things so many times. But to be able to introduce the mayor, who I know for a long, way back then. I used to work at Wild's Mattress Factory, way back then. So I know his family and stuff. And he has been able to do some stuff that, I worked with Joe Riley, he was here with us. But Mayor Tecklenburg has been able to take all over that. And we are hoping that the people continue to see our needs. One of the things that is a problem for us on the island, we are really concerned about flooding and the way that the land now is being just destroyed. And we feel that sometime, Mayor, that God helped us a little bit, because if we didn't have as much rain as we had, more land would have been built on already. So we thank God for that. A lot of things happen, and we laugh about it, but that's what God does. You know, I mean, they said when you can't do it, either people will come and preach for you, but when you can't do it, God will turn it over to the Lord. But you have to do what you can do first. And that's where we're having the most problem, because so many people are not doing nothing, and then want somebody to do something. And I am hoping that we're going to start just going on with making things better and better for people. I grew up, and I'm not supposed to be saying or talking this, but I grew up like Jonathan on the honor, and everything that we ate either came from the woods, came from our fields, or came from the ocean, from the river. Everything. We didn't buy nothing. My grandmother would buy dungarees for me, and they'd buy it about 12 inches too long, and then they would cut it off, and they would keep it, because we played on our knees, and the first thing that goes on the dungarees is the knee, so they have a patch to put on that after we messed it up. So there was nothing that we needed for right now. To a point that we closed the supermarket we started at. And we call it progress. Not that, but anyway, Tecklenburg, people really are on it. I am on it. That you and then I see you in your dress-up clothes, you know. All the time to see you dress up. But I know that one of the things I can say about you, you've been involved and you care. And I want you to continue to look out for yourself. Because I know that people that care suffer more than other people. So I want you to continue to do what.
Bring leaders together and founded a group called COBRA, which was the Committee for Better Racial Assurance in Charleston. And they're still operating great programs addressing sickle cell, anemia, and other health-related issues, and better race relations in our community. So he wasn't feeling quite well enough Saturday to be there, but we gave you an honor. You weren't even there. But we did also honor Judge Richard Fields. Do y'all know Judge Fields? Oh, wow. What a remarkable man. And it was, one of these hour-and-a-half luncheons that lasted about 3.5 hours, okay? So Judge Fields gets up there, and boy, he really told some great stories. He's something. So, and again, thank you, Reverend Mitchell. Did she leave? Oh, there, she's in the back now. Are you related to Councilmember Mitchell, Robert Mitchell? He said he had family out on Johns Island. But anyway, thank you for your hospitality, and Thomas for putting this together and inviting me out here. I sure appreciate it. And I'll echo Reverend Mitchell, your prayer for the blessing that Heidi Todd is alive and back with us in Charleston. And but I ask y'all to please continue to remember the family in your prayers. Mrs. Todd, Brittany is her name, she was really beat up badly and had multiple surgeries already, and she's going to recover. I mean, and she considers her family so blessed just by the fact that Heidi is alive. But we'll need to support the family. And I know I got a message from some Johns Island citizens who started a little fund to help the family. I think at any Wells Fargo bank you can make a donation to help the family. And please remember them in your prayers as well. So it's funny, I was, maybe not funny, but coincidental, I was booked or scheduled to be here tonight for a few weeks now, and before us bringing a proposal last week to City Council to have a moratorium in the city limits on residential development for a little while to, I think we're just proposing 6 months, and I'll talk some more about what we were planning on doing during those 6 months, because we're still planning on doing those things. But to have a little bit of a pause in the development that's been going on in the city out here in order for us to have a plan, a more definitive plan going forward to catch up with some infrastructure that had been planned back in 2008 when the Community Johns Island plan was approved and adopted by City Council. I wasn't around back then, but it got approved, and we've been working off of that plan in a way since then. The real trick on the roads and the traffic congestions and those plans that build the pitchfork and all, as far as the city is concerned, is, and I think most of y'all realize this, but the city does not receive any funding to build a road. We are involved in planning and approval when the DOT or the county has a road project, but up until this point, beyond planning and such things, we haven't been in the road business. And so I don't have a funding stream. The half-cent sales tax that we all pay that goes to road improvements in the county of Charleston goes to the county of Charleston, and they administer that program and dictate certain improvements to be done. And then, of course, the gas tax that we all pay when we buy gas at the pump goes to the state of South Carolina and then gets to the South Carolina Department of Transportation. So the state, the DOT, and the county are the two entities that have a funding source in order to build roads and road improvements. So, I've been grappling with this whole issue since I've become mayor, because I realize there's issues out here on Johns Island in terms of congestion and traffic, but I view it as being even more than that, because I think about public safety. We only have on the city side the one fire station over on Bohicket. We really have gotten to the population already where we need to be moving forward with plans for another public safety station. Nowadays, we tend to combine fire and police under one roof, kind of like we did on Daniel Island, a beautiful, nice facility we have over there. I believe we need to have one of those in addition to the existing fire station that we have. If you look at our parks, we do have one pretty good, I think good city park. It's got a number of facilities with it. I tried to get the county to, I thought they were going to add a swimming pool over there on our park property, but they ended up switching gears and putting that swimming pool down in Hollywood. I think it's where they ended up putting it. But anyway, my point is that it's not even just about roads, it's also about what the city needs to plan on and fund in terms of public safety improvements, parks, recreation programs for our citizens, and the normal fare of what a city should provide as services for its citizens. And it's clear to all of us that government services and infrastructure has not kept up with the growth of population over here, and that was prescribed in that their 2008 plan. So over the last year, I've been thinking about ways that we can fund those improvements going forward. And one model is like they did over in Mount Pleasant. About 30 years ago, they put in place impact fees, where when you build a new house, you'd have to pay an extra fee that would go into paying for things like a new fire station or a new park or whatever, or a new road even. And they did that at a smart time, because I don't know if y'all realize this, but our legislators in Columbia are pretty pro-business, pro-development group of folks. And so they made it harder for cities to put into place impact fees. And in fact, it's very clear in state law. I had our city attorney look into this, that if you put impact fees in place today, you can't use it for the sins of yesterday, like catching up. It's only to address for the future growth, and so there's a case to be made that we could use impact fees for even the future growth, but I'm more concerned personally with trying to catch up on the things that were laid forth in the plan 10 years ago. So that was one avenue, and my staff and my attorney, our city attorney, they went over to Mount Pleasant, they studied everything that the Mount Pleasant folks did 30 years ago, and then updated with what has happened in state law since then. And we basically came to the conclusion that it wasn't the right fit for us, but we investigated it. Then secondly, we looked at another thing that Mount Pleasant did about 15 or 20 years ago, which was a permit allocation plan where you would limit the growth of new permits that are allowed to a certain percentage. Like I think when they did it, they set the cap at 3%, so you couldn't have more than a 3% growth in the number of permits that were released. And so, unfortunately, once again, state law makes that same process almost as difficult as getting impact fees put into place. So anyway, after investigating those two avenues is what kind of led me to the proposal just a few weeks ago to put a moratorium in place. We can do that legally. We have to have a good reason to do it. It can only be for a limited period of time, and during that period of time, it has to be, a prescribed set of action steps that you're going to take during the moratorium period, to try to address whatever situation exists that you want to put the moratorium in place for. So that's what we brought forward. I'll share with you that generally speaking, my city council is not very supportive of moratoriums, although I did get out of them approval on one, West Ashley and the Church Creek drainage basin, because so many of our citizens have been flooded out over there. It was really a compelling reason, and we did put one in place over there until we get our plan going forward in a similar way to address the drainage issues in the Church Creek basin. That moratorium is going to end in May, and we will in fact have some changes to our development requirements and some proposed real drainage solutions. They won't be completed by any means, but they'll be, we'll have studied and know what they are. So that just gives you an example of how a moratorium should work. And it's not designed to last forever and ever, but it's just put in place temporarily to solve and fix a problem. The other example was very limited on James Island. We put a moratorium in place for, I think, just 6 months to allow us to put in place what's called the Folly Road Overlay zoning district. And that brings our James Island and Folly Road zoning in sync with what the town of James Island and the county were on board with. And so I hope you would see that as I do, as a kind of new effort on the city's part to increase the level of cooperation with our partners, notably in that case, the county and the town of James Island. In the case of Johns Island, it's mostly the county of Charleston that we need to be working with. And sometimes the city and the county have worked well together, and sometimes they've disagreed on things. I met personally, of course, I've been talking with Chairman Rawl ever since I became mayor, but I had a kind of special one-on-one with him just last week after our city council meeting. And he's committed to working with me so that we really have the highest level of communication and cooperation between the city and the county relative to issues on Johns Island than I think we've ever had before. And just a short example is a meeting that we've already set up between all of our planning and highway and road traffic and transportation folks to iron out any differences that we've had on the north and the south pitchfork projects specifically. But speaking about traffic and transportation, and he's not with us tonight, we have a new, even though we don't build roads, the city doesn't build roads, but we do help manage traffic. We actually manage the streetlights for the DOT. They belong to the DOT, but we have a contract with them to fix them when the light burns out and help time them and things like that. And to help planning for the future. And we're really blessed. We hired this guy from the United States Department of Transportation. His name is Keith Benjamin, and he's been on board now for about 9 months. And at some point, maybe at a future meeting, we could have Keith here. He had a family commitment, couldn't be with us tonight. But he is a really thoughtful and smart guy. And he started a citywide planning effort that we call it Charleston Citywide Traffic, Citywide Transportation Plan. And what's different about it compared to planning efforts that the city has had in the past is, and this whole roadway thing, I gotta tell you all, is a complicated matter because in addition to the county and the DOT, you also have a regional planning authority called the Council of Governments, and that's required by state law, and they have to look at roadway improvements in the 3-county area, and their priority ranking for projects must be in place to qualify for federal funding. So then that brings the federal funding in, but it's got to be in sync with the county, the Council of Governments, okay? And so for the first time, our citywide planning effort is actually a subset or a part of the Council of Governments planning effort. And so we will get our projects that we prioritize within the proper channels so that they will be eligible long-term for some federal funding. And that's an important thing. So we've come up with, the council allowed us so many projects, we couldn't just put 100 projects on the table, but they allowed us 10 major projects and 3 corridors where you would like take Savannah Highway, and that whole corridor would be a priority for future projects. And so one of the corridors that was selected for our citywide plan was in fact Maybank Highway on Johns Island. And so that's a really positive thing. In addition, the intersection of Chisholm Road and Main Road and near where River Road comes in above the Limehouse Bridge is one of our intersections, and I think staff has a little mock-up of a plan that has come out of that effort. And then the intersection of Maybank and River Road would have been proposed, but it's already, so to speak, being laid up for improvements. So that was some good news I got from Chairman Rawl a week or so ago. Was, you know, we're doing I'll use that collectively, government, it's a county project, is widening Maybank Highway, and the city had, in its planning efforts about a year ago, had one of our consultants come up with some improvements for the intersection itself. But the intersection improvements were not a part of the widening project, but we requested that the county add those improvements to the intersection to the contract, and they have agreed to do that just recently. So there'll also be improvements, an extra turn lane added to the intersection. I think coming off of Maybank, it might have 2 lanes going. No, I'm sorry. When you're coming down River Road from the north, you pass Fenwick on your left, there'll be 2 turn lanes going left on the Maybank Highway, and they're going to widen the turn lanes and all like that, in addition to widening roads. So that's a good thing. So maybe I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm going to go back and just speak briefly about this here 2008 Johns Island Community Plan that was a community effort. It was approved by the City Council of Charleston almost 10 years ago. And this is what our city planning department has been, going by. We talked about this at the city council meeting last week, and I maybe joked a little bit, but we really are going by the plan. The downside was that, as I described to you, some of the infrastructure that was a part of the plan never got done, and so that's again the reason that we want to catch up. I want to just say that looking at this plan, I know some of you may or may not agree with what was proposed in this plan. But what it does in a nutshell, in my view, is create, even though it's most part in the city limits of Charleston, a town of Johns Island that's basically within the urban growth boundary. And I know, again, that might not suit everybody, but that's what happened. That's what happened. And so that plan included the development of pretty intensive density in neighborhoods near the Maybank corridor. And the thought was that would long-term become a commercial center where there would be shopping and some jobs and some other commercial development, so that everybody on Johns Island wouldn't have to drive back downtown or even to Citadel Mall or wherever off the island in order to, enjoy their daily lives out here. Because I know folks complain about the traffic, but I certainly got the sense last week when I spent time out here that it's a wonderful place to live. I mean, that's why y'all were all here in the first place, right? It's a great, wonderful place, and they're wonderful people out here. And I do want to make this kind of personal observation from last week's experience. And I heard a number of comments last week at City Council about these, quote, cookie cutter neighborhoods. That the implication was that was a bad thing, that we had these cookie cutter neighborhoods. But what I really felt in my heart last week when I was out at one of those cookie cutter neighborhoods, the one near Whitney Lakes, is they're not cookie cutter people. And that Todd family, I met the grandparents and aunt, and they're just fine people. Now they moved here from afar, and sometimes us been here's, we take some exception to all them come here's that have come here, and that's something that's happened here in our region all over, not just Johns Island, with 42 people a day, they say on average moving to the Charleston area. But Mr. Todd is a member of the Coast Guard, and he serves his country, and his wife and he have 5 beautiful children, and luckily they still have 5 beautiful children. And the neighbors, most of whom probably all moved here too from afar, there was this sense of community and caring and love for what had happened in their neighborhood that was as real as could be. And it was a beautiful thing in that sense. I just thought I'd share that because some of what this growth has meant is a development of community and some really fine people joining our city and joining our community, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing in my view. So where do we go from here? During this proposed moratorium, whether City Council passes it or not, really the big thing on my list is to come up with a capital improvements plan building upon what was put forth in this 2008 community plan. A good bit of that involves, road improvements and connectivity that Johns Island does not enjoy today. And as our city planning staff, was able to influence whole developments that have occurred, we certainly asked them to provide those streets and roads and stub out to where they would connect in the future to the next neighborhood that gets done, or even through some undeveloped property. And there are pieces of that missing that we need to pay for and make happen. But in addition, as I mentioned, to the road improvements, we got to look at public safety, parks, and any other improvements that are necessary. So given that there's this mixed bag of folks, the city, county, and others that are involved, I had proposed that we, in essence, have a capital projects Johns Island task force to include yourselves and other neighborhood groups, but notably to include myself and the city council member from Johns Island, Chairman Rawl, and the county council member, somebody from the Water Commission, someone from our traffic and transportation, the county traffic and transportation, the South Carolina DOT, the county and city planning directors, again, representatives of Johns Island Concerned Citizens and the Johns Island Community Association, and some member or two from the development community. They're part of this as well, and perhaps the mayors of Kiowa and Seabrook. So we're going to convene and talk about all these issues and try to not only get input. I kind of envision almost an update of this plan where we will have community meetings and seek input and ideas about what ought to be on that list. But then importantly, how are we going to pay for it? And we do have property taxes, and we're going to work with the county to use as much of that half-cent sales tax as they can for improvements. I mean, they did allocate, at least on the ballot question the year before last for the new half-cent, $195 million for improvements that would include the intersection of Savannah and Highway and Main Road, all the way down to Betsy Carrison Parkway. So what that looks like hadn't been determined yet, but that's a pile of money, and maybe some of that long stretch of Main Road is okay the way it is, and we could prioritize some of these other connections that need to be made and projects that need to be made, and spend some of that half-cent sales tax on other projects on Johns Island. I believe that the county has the flexibility to do that if they want to, and so that's all part of what I would propose we do. Another idea, by the way, that I'll share with you, that is more feasible for us to put into place than either those impact fees or allocation plans that I was telling you about that aren't so easy to accomplish, is something called a municipal improvement district. This is allowed by state law, and with the cooperation and agreement of future developers, future development, that they would in effect allow an impact fee to be assessed on new home sites, or I guess it's done when the home is ready. It kind of amounts to an impact fee, but it's done on a voluntary basis. And I have requested a meeting with all the developers of the known proposed developments on the island to pitch that to them in just a couple of weeks. And but just to share with you the numbers that some of you already know, why this is all happening is that in the last 8 years, just the population growth in the city limits of that's on Johns Island has gone from 5,266 individuals in the 2010 census to an estimated 9,542 this year. So that's an 81% increase, which is much higher than the average of the rest of the city is 21%. So we're growing everywhere like a weed, but y'all, we get the prize here on the fastest growth on Johns Island. And like it or not, I mean, part of being mayor is just telling y'all the reality. I asked my staff to put together a list of these developments that are happening out here, or even some of which are proposed. And this was all done, I'll put the caveat out there, these were all done before I became mayor. You know, so, I mean, you can blame me for it if you like, and that's fine. But if you look at the dates of when all these things came together, it was some of them date all the way back to 2006 and 7 and 8 and 9. But there's thousands of possible homes to be built, or housing residential units. The number of units remaining that are already in some phase of approval is numbers over 4,000, 4,282 to be exact. Now, having said that, it's just reality. The market absorption of what's been sold averages about 300 a year. So even though you might have thousands sitting out there that are possible, I mean, it's what will the market bear, and that's probably somewhere in that range of what's been happening, which is about 300 a year. So, and we have some things that y'all can look at afterwards, or if you want to come up close later. Of course, here just here's Maybank Highway coming through the island, and all of these square boxes you see are the various developments that either have occurred, or maybe they've built out a certain percentage of units, but then there's some that haven't even gotten started good yet, and so that's where all that big number comes from. That 4,282 is from these boxes that you see. And then this one, if you don't mind putting it up, Thomas, I'll move this one out of the way. This is, I think, maybe the most important. This was the existing roads, I believe, back in 2008. And this red line is here, this also in red but dotted, is the urban growth boundary. And so, once again, I mentioned this before, and I kind of realized it when we've been going through all this process recently, is what this plan did, whether you like it or not. It creates what I would call the town of Johns Island right here, and then it protects the density of development in the everything outside of this red dotted line, which is the urban growth boundary. And so that's what the city and the county both agreed on back in 2008 or 9, and that's what we've been living under ever since that time. So to make this somewhat livable, you got to improve the roads, and so this shows the way it was, and this shows about where we are now with the blue roads being the things that have been added since 2008. But then this one over here shows these green roads that add really that connect the dots and really add the connectivity, and those are the things that we need to continue to work on to get built. And I will just say that the plan from 2008 also included the project to widen Maybank Highway in the north and the south Pitchfork concept. And so that's finally in the works, but who would have guessed that we'd be here 10 years later and it's not completed yet. And then of course there's the famous story of the extension of 526, which is shown on here with a couple of drop-offs to River Road. And of course, that was anticipated in this 2008 plan, which has never occurred. So that's what kind of puts us in this pickle, and that's why I think we need to have a pause and figure this thing out a little better and move forward. But again, just being real with you, I can't put the genie back in the bottle. And this was a plan that was done 10 years ago, and many folks have gotten entitlements and property rights to do things, and I can slow them down, but unless the city wanted to engage in a lawsuit with everybody out there, it's not something that we can rezone and say, we're going to take your rights away, you're not going to be able to build another house out here. We can't do that. And that was set in motion 10 years ago. So I would propose to you that we work together and make the best out of this thing and try to get as many of these improvements in place as we can, as quickly as we can, and slow the growth down. So that's my summary. And Thomas, I'll be glad to take any questions and roll from there.
Well, first thing, I think we'll let you answer questions now. Before we get started, Mayor, I'd like to say I think all of us saw what happened last week, and I think thank you for your role in it. I know it was a tough job not being able to tell the public everything that's going on. You still can't because it's an ongoing investigation, but for a few days there, you were the face of not only Charleston, but the whole country was watching you, and we appreciate what you did there. That was a tough thing, and we all praise the Lord that little girl came home safe. I'll take some questions. I know a couple of hands raised over there. I'm going to give the mayor back the mic. Let's everybody remember, please be civil. We're in a church, so please be civil. Everybody understand? So I would like to say I'd like to thank Christina White and her husband Brian, who's feminist. If any of y'all are on Johns Island United on Facebook, you know Christina and I are the ones that have to thank this job of keeping everybody herding cats, I think the question is. Ma'am, if you'll go first.
Okay. You want to recognize the questions, though, and I'll answer them. Yes, ma'am.
I'll hand you this mic. I think we can talk on it too.
Hi, I was wondering, with the original plan.
Can you speak up?
Sorry, from the plan from 2007, what was the funding source? And then, two, you said that the impact fees, it wasn't a good idea. And I didn't really get a good idea as to why impact fees were.
Okay. Well, the primary source for the roadway improvements would have been the first half cent, and there was some federal funds as well. And there's been, some Well, I'll just tell you, Chairman Roll likes to remind me that the city, in order to save some trees, they came up with a pitchfork idea, which ended up, for some reason or other, I'm not sure I fully understand it, meant the county had to spend the federal funds somewhere else, so they ended up going to the improvement over on James Island of Camp Road and Folly Road, I think. So some of those funds got moved over to another highway project. But to answer your question, mostly county half-cent funds and some federal funds. And if I may, I'm going to ask my planning director, Jacob Lindsay, because he can give a better answer on the question about the impact fees and why that turned out to not be a great idea. Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so, so there's a question about how do you fund infrastructure improvements, especially when you're a city like us, where we don't build roads, we don't have a mechanism to collect funds for roads. And the short answer to the impact fee question is that Mount Pleasant, our neighbor just to the east, had the unique and positive condition that they had impact fees on the books dating back to the 1990s, back when they created their original infrastructure plan. And in the meantime, between the 1990s and now, the laws that, basically the state laws that govern the creation of impact fees became much, much, much more onerous, much more difficult. The state feels like impact fees are something that shouldn't have been as widespread as they have been in the past. And what it means for us is that we would have to go through a whole lot of legal work which wouldn't allow us to actually do very much with the impact fees at the end of the day, because they can only be used to mitigate problems going forward from the time the impact fees are passed. So for example, we couldn't build out the additional pitchforks with impact fee money. We couldn't make strategic roadway improvements or intersection improvements with the impact fee money, because it would be accounting for growth that's already happened. And that's not an effective solution for Don's Island in our mind. It wouldn't get us where we need to go.
Do you live on John's Island, sir?
No, I do not.
Yeah, you don't. Thank you.
Okay, this gentleman has the mic.
Just improve that point.
Thank you for coming to speak with us tonight. I was just curious about, you were talking about how the city council, it's hard to get them to care enough about issues here to act on it like they did on the Church Creek situation, for instance. My question is, how can this issue become as important in the eyes of the city council as the Church Creek issue? How can it become the same in their eyes, and what can we do to impress that upon them?
Well, again, I think I said that as a general rule, they don't like moratoriums. Again, it's kind of a pro-business, pro-chamber of commerce kind of mentality. And so I think it takes hearing from their constituents and citizens as to how important it is. I'm prepared to vote for it, I can tell you that. In the meantime, I'm going to just try to do what I view as the right thing and get all this stuff going. But
So it's just a sheer number of people?
yeah, we need
Support
seven. We need 7 votes to put the moratorium in place. But that's not going to fix it. It just gives us a pause, a little breathing room to think thoughtfully and come up with a little better plan of what really needs to be done, number one, and how to fund it. So after 6 months, you got the greatest plan in the world, and we got the ideas on how to fund it. Then it's going to take a while to actually do them, but you can't just let a moratorium go forever. But I still believe it's appropriate to have one for the 6-month period.
Okay, down over here, yeah, come across.
Hi, Mayor. It's impressive that the interconnectivity is going well, but it seems like the main problem is getting on and off the island, and from a public safety point of view as well, not just a sit in traffic every day point of view. But what kind of assurance could we have that funding that might get allocated to the pitchfork design, things that would help get on and off the island, would not get sent to another Camp Road project in the future? What kind of assurance is there? I mean, because it seems like that's already happened, and it's been in the works for 10 years.
Right, it happened years ago, I'm not sure when, that there was that diversion. Chairman Rohr reminds me about every time I see him. Not that he blames me, but he just, that's part of the history of this story. I think two parts answer. One is that the city and the county need to do what I feel like we're doing now, and make sure we're on the same page and don't get any big misunderstanding or disagreement. And I must tell you, my kind of general rule about it is the guy that's got the checkbook, he ought to be able to, have the biggest say so. So if they're paying for the project with half-cent sales tax, and the county really feels that, it ought to weave this way rather than that way, it's okay with me. Just let's get move the ball forward and get the thing built. So I'm not planning on having a big fussing match with them about anything.
We'll get Bucky in
They're
more.
paying for it.
One right here.
Hey, Bucky.
Come out tonight.
Yes, sir.
Bucky Morris, I've been an islander just about my whole life. And I guess I was asleep at the wheel when this plan came up. I was a businessman and worked all the time. But it was envisioned to clear cut every tree and every blade of grass between Maybank Highway and Brownswood Road in this initial plan, and to go from, there's some developments that have, one house an acre, 2 houses an acre. Now they're developed that have 6 houses an acre. Is that all part of the original plan, to have 6 houses an acre?
I wasn't there when it was put together, and I'm just looking at the units remaining and the gross acreage and the density works out. It looks like most of these densities are in 2s and 3s, but the average density is about 4 units per acre. For the area of development that you see, that again within the urban growth boundary.
I know some developments in the area that have 6 houses an acre.
Yeah, I'm just saying the average.
I mean, you have Swagger's Landing that, there's a nice development over there. There's several nice developments that have come up in here.
Right.
But now, these developments are getting really expensive, and I don't know who's approving going from 2 houses an acre to 6 houses an acre. That's creating a real issue. You can't even walk out the door in some of these subdivisions without running your next door neighbor. I'm not fortunate to have that. I live on the road. But, they clear cut all the trees. The land doesn't drain anymore. It doesn't rain.
Yeah.
They've taken out thousands and thousands of dump trucks of sludge and filled in wetlands, okay? The drains are going straight to the river. After heavy rain, the river is red across from my street. I live on River Road on the river. The development is now stopped. It was supposed to be for retirement homes or whatnot. They spent a whole bunch of money. Now it's stopped. But the drainage goes right into the river. The claim is, it gets towed, but when the time it rains and all that land goes right to the river. Every place you see on John's Island that's clear cut right now, there's nothing but standing wall. That's wicked. How can it go?
Well, I don't know how many of y'all have been involved in the development process, but to fill wetlands, we don't give permission for that. The Corps of Engineers does that, so that's the federal government work. When you do build a new subdivision, I know when they do clear cut to get started, but they have to meet drainage requirements, code requirements, and they have to meet landscape. And I know often they replant rather than keep what's there, but sometimes they more thoughtfully do keep what's there. And if the trees are a certain size, don't we have to keep them? So, I mean, there are regulations about all that. And I hear you, but,
There's a development going on right across my street, right across my house.
which one is that?
River Road. Right across on River Road.
Yeah.
One lot over from Brownswood Road. 30 acres, they could build 72 houses over there. That's started yet. That was not permitted back in the 80s. That was just done this past year for the land that's sold. There's another one almost to Maybank Highway among the homes had situated, they let it loose and some other builders going in there, and that thing's clear cut and going back to another subdivision. I mean, it's ridiculous what's going on there.
I hear you.
Do you need a mic?
No, you're not gonna need
Speak loud, 'cause- and then I'm gonna do this gentleman, Gary, that lady.
Everybody needs to use the mic.
Can you hear me? Mr. Mayor, I think the problem, the answer to all of these questions is, you've got a good plan here from 2008. Dr. Dustin did a wonderful job of helping write it years ago. The problem was you didn't put any teeth into it. And it's not you, because you weren't there 10 years ago. But there are no teeth in this. There's no ordinances that are associated with it. Like you said a week ago, you pushed City Council to extend the Church Creek moratorium. And you did it on the basis of Ms. Kavanagh standing up and saying, we need additional time in order to put some teeth into these recommendations. We don't have any teeth here. I asked you, a lot of us stood up and asked you last week, and you were one of the ones that pushed it. Take some time and put some teeth into this plan. Study it, make some additional ones, but put some teeth into this plan. What are you doing to put some teeth into this plan? And to preventing, you said just a minute ago that we've had 5,500 city residents 8 years ago. It's gone up to 9,500. About 4,000 people have come into the city in the last 8 years. In other words, since this plan was adopted. Right now, there are 4,200 units. Units, not people. Units. Probably 2 people at least in each one of those. They're already on the books. We need teeth to this. What are you doing to put teeth into this?
That's another 8,000.
Thank you. Well,
Quick math.
we want to slow the pace down, number one. We're reviewing not just on Johns Island, but citywide, our stormwater requirements whenever you build a home or develop a piece of property, because we got drainage issues everywhere in the city. And we hired a firm, ACOM is their name, that is working on those recommendations. There are specific ones for the floodplain of the Church Creek Basin, but we are at the same time doing a citywide review of our stormwater management. So, Bucky, I mean, I hear you, but when we make our requirements even tighter, which we will put some more teeth into our requirements, if somebody's not up to code, we'll go get them. But they got to follow our codes. We need to make them stronger, put more teeth into them, as you say. But the other thing is to have funding in place to be able to put these little green roads into place, and that's I can't pass an ordinance to do that, but I can certainly.
How about passing an ordinance to follow this? Because this is the recommendation from the James Island plan 10 years ago. Environmental factors, and this is on page 25 of the plan. Under recommendations, respond to and respect the environment. Environmental factors will be of primary importance when making planning decisions and development recommendations for Johns Island. Land at lower elevations, which is what we're talking about a lot. Land at lower elevations will be recommended for agricultural uses, longleaf pine forest, natural preserve, or hyper low density housing. In Buck, that would be 1 dwelling per 10 acres. It doesn't cost a dime to put an ordinance in that says we're going to follow this plan. And the problem is, as you said, your planning commission has looked at it, your planners have looked at it, and they've followed along, and they've approved an awful lot of subdivisions, ignoring the fact, as you said, that the transportation and everything else is not here. You have an opportunity. City Council has an opportunity to avoid the problem that Church Creek is facing right now. 20 years from now, if growth continues, if you continue to ignore this, then 20 years from now we're going to be dealing with millions of dollars to bail out subdivisions that aren't here right now. Don't let them come in.
Let her speak, then I'm going to get the jump, so we don't have to pass the mic back.
I'm going to go on a with what they're saying as well. I have a couple acres right off Brownswood Road, and we've got these developments, and we're talking about the codes. Well, I'm imagining the code is that we're building these new neighborhoods up really high. What used to be a small little stream that ran across the middle of my property now isn't going anywhere. I'm becoming a soup bowl. So Whitney Lakes, which used to be, I think, Ryland, then sold to Cal Atlantic, and now I believe Lennar, and then Lennar is putting another 70 homes on the other side of me. We are definitely going to be a soup bowl while you continue to let these things rise. How is that code? How is that? That's the
You want to answer that?
Answer that?
You know, if you build anew, your runoff is not supposed to be a negative impact to someone else's property.
It's not but it is. It is. Yeah. It already is.
It's happening, whether you like it or not.
John's Island has 2 ways on, 2 ways off. How is it you can propose all this injustice of overdeveloping on an island where people already have heavy congestion, and you're just piling in more and more people because somebody has the money to build? So 81% growth on John's Island compared to the rest of Charleston. I say maybe someone's getting a little bit too much money in their pocketbook, and we're all feeling the injustice of it. And no one is doing anything about it. Nothing. You're still up there talking a good game, but I don't see any roads that's going to make it any better. I don't hear about we're going to take out some trees as we have to make room for growth. I'm hearing nonsense. I'm hearing something that happened.
I respect your opinion. I'm not proposing this development. I'm sharing with you the reality of what has happened here. I'm not proposing it.
I understand it's not your fault, but you need to go back and tell people that this is an injustice, what you're doing on John's Island.
And I propose what that man said. We'll vote on that.
Okay, Gary's got the mic next.
I know, Mr. Mayor, one thing you said that kind of disturbed me was that the idea that the moratorium on Church Creek could end in May. Have you got the drainage problem solved by May?
We'll have the projects plan that will help solve.
The answer then is no. You won't.
They won't be completed, no, sir. I'm telling you that you don't keep a moratorium.
I'm going to have to go back to Webster's and check the definition again of moratorium, but it seems like in this situation that a moratorium should mean we're going to stop one thing until we get caught up on something else. The something else is going to be, in that case, drainage. On our situation with 47 people a day coming to Charleston County, if we don't get our flyover down here on Main and 17 soon, the amount of construction going on back there, you're going to have gridlock. And it's not going to be a pretty thing. The next time we get a storm, the next time we get a real storm, it's going to be really something good. Most of the people in this room, I've been here on John's Island since 1985, which makes me a newcomer. But a lot of these people have been here a lot less than that. They've not been through a major storm. No, I mean,
I hear you.
what you're doing, moratorium means you got to stop until we catch up with infrastructure.
I have, the city of Charleston enjoys one of the finest municipal legal minds in the state, Francis Cantwell. I'm not an attorney. I have to listen to the advice and the reality. They're great folks.
Okay.
And she tells me, Mayor, you can't put a moratorium in forever and ever. You got to have.
Everybody passes the buck. The city passes the buck to the county, county passes the buck to the state. It's just a pass the buck thing, and nothing gets done.
She doesn't have a basis for saying that. There's no basis.
There is no basis.
She doesn't.
Okay, I'm gonna give this lady the mic.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. How are you?
Great.
In my short 49 years of living on Johns Island, there's some information that I have as far as history is concerned, the population. In 2000, the year 2000 was like 21,263 persons. 2017, we're tipping pretty close to 40,000 people on the island. And about 2027, we'll be looking pretty close to about 50,000 people being on the island. And to me, it's like a domino effect. I agree with everyone here and what they're saying, and I do understand what they're saying. We've had tremendous growth. Like I said, I grew up on this island where I could walk from the main one street to the next, to Mount Zion School, to the main road probably with my eyes closed. But the traffic is so heavy, and I feel so sorry for Bambi. You know, every 2 days or so I see Bambi on the side of the road. But with that being aside, it's a domino effect. We have all these subdivisions coming here, and I understand what you were saying earlier about things that have been put into place before you became in office. But after you came in office, of course, I'm sure there were some other things as well. And like I mentioned earlier, the domino effect is when you have these subdivisions that's being built, then you have people paying their taxes. And one gentleman mentioned earlier about some pockets being fed or whatever case. I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. All I know is, when is enough going to be enough? When are we going to stop and continue to allow these subdivisions? Because right now on Johns Island, some people have land they can't even use. And they're kind of forced to put their lands for sale, and who's going to buy them but developers? And developers are going to come, and they're going to build more and more homes. And not only that, even property taxes are increasing. And some people, they can't even afford to pay their property tax. And what happens with that? Then they're forced to sell their land. And developers comes in, and they purchase their land, and they build more houses, and they're approved through the city to build houses. So why is that happening? Why does that continue to happen?
It continues to happen because they have the underlying zoning that gives the property owner the right to build on their property. So if we put together a conservation bank and bought up a bunch of this property and agreed amongst ourselves that we would never build on it, then it would never get built on it. But if it's privately owned and it's zoned SR1, which is just single-family residential zoning, you can build how many per acre? 4.8 units per acre. That's because they have zoning. They have a legal right.
But the thing about it is, we're not the ones agreeing to build the subdivision. It's the city or the council or whomever committee, whatever, they're the ones that's agreeing to build.
I know, but I'm telling you, all the zoning is out there already. Mm-hmm. And so now, if we go and unzone it, then we get sued for a condemnation or a taking. So it's a tough situation.
I'm going to pass the mic to her in a minute, but I would like to say one thing. I don't know where the figures came from, but everybody, if you ever do research on the population of Johns Island on the census thing, the census bases it on 29455 zip code. That also takes in Grand Oaks, or part of Grand Oaks and the Hunt Club. So that jacks, I don't doubt that it is 20,000 people in Johns Island right now, but that jacks it way up because of all the growth. That's why if you look at 2000 census and the 2010 census, it went 7,000 or 8,000 people up in the 29455 zip code, because that includes that West Ashley area that just was nothing but swamp. And of course, their drainage is affecting us on Main Road, so that affects that. I don't know how exactly you found it. Well, let me give this lady the mic. And I'm going to move up to the front. And
good evening. My one question had been, since you say you can't stop this, has anybody even considered where funding is going to come from for increased first responders and schools? But since this lady spoke, and then you mentioned conservation, I have something I want to say. I'm new to the island, but my husband's family's been here for forever. His grandfather used to have the Baptist Christian Mission at 3577 Bohicket Road on 17 acres of land. When they first proposed the Sea Island Greenway, it was going to cut. Any of the three plans that they were going to choose was going to cut right through that property that we now own. We tried to put it into a conservation easement, and I got a phone call from someone, and I can't remember if it was from the county or the state, but we were told that if we tried to put that land into a conservation easement, because they'd already had that Sea Island Greenway in the works, they would sue us to keep us from doing it. Now, how can they do that? Can you answer both of my questions, please?
well, I can tell you, because I've done a lot of work on the Greenway and 526. I'll let the mayor answer and give his opinion. and looked at conservation easements for our own property. The conservation easement will not stop a highway project, which is not right. Mayor?
I'm not an attorney, but I believe if you own your property, you put a conservation easement on it. Somebody can come behind you and condemn you, but I don't know of any reason why you can't do that with your own property.
Okay, now what about the funding for these first responders?
Oh, okay. You know, you might be new here, but we have different funding for different things. You know, generally your city property taxes pay for police and fire, but this is an interesting fact that all of the property tax that the city collects citywide does not cover our police and fire expenses, because we're pulling fees from other income sources, but that's somewhat a different matter. For the schools, that's a property tax as well, but that goes directly to the Charleston County School District, and they control that pot of money. The roads, again, you got a ½ that goes to the county, your gas tax that goes to the state, and then whatever little bit we can get back from the federal government, which ain't much.
Okay, so do we know if there, because we are increasing so many people on a daily basis, do you know if any extra funds have been allocated for this for us? Because with more people comes more crime, especially with connectivity. Speaking as a retired 30-year law enforcement officer, the more connectivity you have, the more crime you have.
Well, I don't know about that, but
I studied with a well-renowned person who teaches geographic profiling to intelligence officers for law enforcement agencies, and increased connectivity increases crime.
so anyway, most roadway money comes from county and state. For like the new fire station I'm talking about, that would come through the city and would be property taxes that we collect from the city. And as population grows, we plan and build new stations. We just finished a new station over in West Ashley. It's in, what do they call that development? Carolina Bay Development. We're about to buy a site up on Canehoy Road. That area is growing like a weed as well. We need another fire station out that way. So, and we do that through our city property taxes.
My name's Catherine Pogue, and I want to thank you for coming and bringing members of the staff. I've only lived here 8 years, but I can't recall that the mayor during that time has ever come out to listen to all of the concerns. I want to remind everyone here too that you and your staff work for all of us, and perhaps we need to be more proactive in letting you know what our concerns are and maybe get you here on a more regular basis. And I think the whole plan that you have in mind to get some community groups together should help do that. Hard question, why did Daniel Island get the new fire station and we didn't?
Well, you've got a fire station overall.
Right, yeah, but we need another.
You'll need another one. Their population is now about 13,000, and they didn't have any. So when they got a new one, it was their first fire station. So anyway, that's probably why.
Thanks,
Hi there, Tecklenburg. My name is Jackie Todd. Question. It seems to be a structural issue that we're facing here, where the city plans things, but someone else has to pay. And because I kind of heard that earlier in your speech. If I recall correctly, Jacksonville, Florida used to be the same way, where we had city government, where they had city and county, and now they only have one. Have we considered that for Charleston? Because that way, whoever's planning will be the one that's paying, and we won't have this disconnect.
Right. They have a consolidated government down in Jacksonville and Duval County, I think is the name of the county. And that was looked at, I understand, in Charleston County some decades ago. The Chamber of Commerce went down there and studied what they had done. They had the little better situation where there was really just one main municipality. And I think already by the time they had studied it, we had the city of North Charleston, the city of Mount Pleasant. There are 37 and 38 different jurisdictions. And politically, apparently it wasn't possible. It was considered for Charleston County, but it didn't ever get any legs. And I believe even now it would be very difficult to do. But since I've been mayor, I've been trying to work with the county and town of James Island. We did the West Ashley Master Plan. I intentionally included somebody from the St. Andrews Public Service District in the county on that commission so that we had communication and input from the various jurisdictions. You know, I wouldn't mind this city of county consolidation idea, but I don't know how practical or politically feasible it is.
The problem with that now is that Charleston, City of Charleston, you're in 3 different counties, correct? You're in Dorchester County also, Berkeley?
No, we're just in Berkeley. City of North Charleston is in all 3 counties.
City of Mount Pleasant's in Charleston and Berkeley County, I believe.
That's correct. So it's complicated.
Mr. Mayor, I too want to thank you for coming here tonight. We really do appreciate you listening to our concerns. And I'm kind of coming from the other perspective. I'm a real estate agent, and don't stone me, please. But I have sold a number of homes here on Johns Island, and I've seen basically, you know, the new neighborhoods coming in, and they are not well thought out. They are not well planned, even though we like to think that they are, especially developers really like to think they are. But just for an example, Stono View has come into, you know, basically right down the road from where we are now. They came in with an original plan that has been, you know, reconfigured several different times. As a matter of fact, we had a couple that is moving into our neighborhood from Stono View because they were sold, you know, a house in the very beginning of the neighborhood, and they were sold one thing, and now there's another. They've taken away a lot of the land in Stono View, and they're developing new houses. So I guess my question for you is, there is a proposed development that is supposed to go in between Stono Point, which is Burden Creek Road, and the airport. On the plans right now, there's supposed to be 200 houses. We see that it could be built out to 300 houses. They are proposing to use our private road to access this neighborhood. And our private road is Burden Creek Extension. They have to come into our neighborhood, which is Stono Point, and to access this road to get back to that proposed development. We are in the midst of, you know, going to the Planning Commission meetings and so on and so forth, but we need a relief from this. I mean, if it is passed, if it is voted on, then there's no proper ingress and egress for this particular neighborhood off of River Road. They actually have to come onto our private road. And I just would like to urge everyone to look at that plan and hopefully come out and support our feelings and our wishes that it does not pass. So, thank you.
It's your road. Put up the gate.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. You've mentioned that the city is limited, it doesn't build roads, it is limited in terms of the impact fees it can generate. But the city does have the power to approve new developments, new neighborhoods, correct? The city has the power to rezone. The city has the power to issue building permits, correct? Did I say anything that's inaccurate?
Well, it's not inaccurate, but if you have the zoning and you meet all the requirements, I can't tell you can't build a home. I can only delay it by putting a moratorium in place. Unless I rezone it.
But let's take a situation where you don't have the rezoning. You don't have the zoning at all. You have a parcel of property that's in the outermost portion of the city, right up against the airport. It's barely above sea level. It floods already, okay? It's not zoned. So you've mentioned that you've got limited control, but what you do have control over, the city has control over, is it gonna stick to that plan? Okay, because if you overdevelop well in excess of that plan, then what you're doing is you're voluntarily adding cars and traffic to the existing infrastructure that you keep saying you have little control over. So then why would you and your staff be behind, fully behind, apparently in bed with the developers of Oakville Plantation that's just getting off the books? If in fact you really care about us, then you and your staff will quit conspiring with the developer and allowing density on this piece of property that's 10 times the adjoining neighborhood and more than 30 times the plan. So show us, if you really care about us, what you and your staff do with respect to Oakville will tell us a lot about how we vote next election. Thank you.
We have plans and there are plans, and we try to follow them, and they get incorporated, by the way, in what is called the Century 5, which is a master plan of the city, and it's required by state law that we have it. But at the end of the day, it's the zoning that controls what can happen.
Right, and you don't have to grant the developer's petition for rezoning that will allow density 10 times.
That's correct.
The adjoining property.
That's correct.
And that's what you're asking. We're asking you not to do. We're asking your staff to show us its objectivity and that it is not really allied with what we view as our advocacy.
And if there's a rezoning, despite what staff does, it has to be approved by the planning commission and by city council. Just to let them know that's the process. If there's a both.
But on the Big Raw property, the planning commission turned it down.
Yeah. Sorry. City council can overrule the planning commission with a super majority vote.
There is power to do that much.
Mr. Mayor, hi, I'm Phil Destin. I want to draw your attention to two books that are very relevant to John's Island. The first one is Ain't You Got a Right to the Tree?
I've got a copy of that.
Okay, so that explains why John's Island is a special place. Slavery by Another Name, and this is a copy for you.
I have a copy of that as well.
Person, you
I'll take it.
Take it and let your staff read it. This explains why John's Island is such a special place. Now, I helped write the plan that you've been talking about. I'm a scientist. I believe in data. When I was on that plan, I exposed the whole staff, including Christopher Morgan and Josh Martin, who you know, to a new technology called LIDAR. And LIDAR showed us that this is not a flat earth plan like you have it here. What we have is one dune here and one dune here with a swale in between. And new path analysis of that shows actually that we have Burden Creek Basin right in here that collects water from up here from Maybank Road all the way down here to the airport, and this funnels into this area. And this area is essentially a river, just like the Wando River or just like the Ashley River, just a little bit smaller. Now, all of the developing, and this is what I brought to the Johns Island plan when I was on the planning committee, all of this area here is places that were farmed because the farmers knew it would flood, so they didn't build their houses there. They built their houses on the high ground. And what happens in a swale system, and this is an old beach, just like Bucky Morris is saying, what happens is the water collects in the trough or in the swale, the soil builds up, and we have essentially a sponge forest or a swamp forest. And you've been working with the Green Infrastructure Group from Virginia, and they've explained the idea that these forests have adapted to basically absorb moisture when it's there. I visited the other day, I went above Maybank Highway and visited this development where they're deforesting. And after they'd taken off the organic material, which was a good 3 feet, you could stand on the soil and bounce it. It collects so much water. So this is like our water storage unit on the island. When they scrape all that off, and they dig out a retention pond like they do at Stono Point, and they then coat that, they smear it like peanut butter, 3 to 6 feet thick over the entire area, they create an area that is really no different than a parking lot in terms of its impervious nature. They try to channelize the water, and it all goes into essentially sheet flow, which goes across and into the river, which then poisons the river. And that's where my career began. So you go, oh, okay, gee, you know, this is just a consequence of development. But when we raised this whole issue, Josh Martin stood up and said, we should have no development below 15 feet because it's going to be hazardous. Because we can have a Katrina-type situation in this swale. If you come over to this map over here, this actually shows what I'm talking about. The red is high, so we have this high dune down Maybank, and we have this higher area over here by the airport, and all of this area in here is slated for development. Well, this area here, that's the Burden Creek Basin, is going to funnel right past the proposed Oakville plantation. And by the way, Oakville Road is Mr. Lackey's driveway that he asked the city to rename. It's his driveway. That's Oakville Road. And Jack Hill Road is actually just an easement. So neither of those are roads. They're just figments that people wrote down for a long time. But you can imagine this area here. And Catherine, who got up and spoke before, lives here. When all of this becomes impervious and we get another 8 or 10 inches of rain, that's going to wash down here and flood out her house. So what we are doing by cutting the forest is we're removing our resiliency, we're replacing it with parking lots that have sod. And a few trees. And you may remember James Watt, who was the Secretary of the Interior under Ronald Reagan. When they were cutting the redwoods, he said, well, if you've seen one redwood tree, you've seen them all. That's sort of the way your planning department is acting with respect to trees. When Eric Schultz says, all I want to see are the grand trees, well, he's basically saying, yeah, we have a few oak trees. So what do they do with the oak trees? They put a fence around them so we don't disturb their roots. They fill right up to the edge of them, and they die in a couple of years. So it's sort of death by preservation. Know better. They know better. They're lying to you. They're lying to all of us. They're not doing the right thing for the citizens. Your first job is to protect us and our rights and our property and our lives. And what we're setting up here is a situation that, as was pointed out, in 10 or 20 years, you're going to flood these areas out, but probably in 5 or 10 years when we get the next big storm. A Category 2 storm would completely flood this area. A Category 3 storm, there would be 9 feet of water where Oakville Plantation is being planned. That's the most vulnerable piece of land on entire Johns Island. And you want to put 287 homes there.
We don't live here.
That's crazy. It's ludicrous.
And you care about the safety of the people?
We can't get off
I was a chemistry major myself.
Listen, I will help with the planning. I've helped before. I spent a large amount of time on this, and as I said before, the work that these guys are doing basically treads on the science. And science has to guide us into the future. Not opinions, not zoning, science has to guide us.
I was a chemistry major, so I believe in using data to help make decisions. But 10 years ago, y'all didn't incorporate any requirements from building in a floodplain or anything like that. It's something we all look at. In fact, it's something we're looking at for the Church Creek Drainage Basin.
This is new knowledge that we have to apply. And the moratorium needs to stop any land clearing. The moratorium is basically a fraud. It's not a moratorium because it allows the building and the land clearing and the filling to go on. It doesn't stop it. And that's the thing. When you destroy the natural infrastructure of this island, you're going to destroy the island.
He doesn't care because he doesn't live here.
Play nice.
My name is Van Crum, I'm a long-time resident of Johns Island. And I've got a question, a legal point. After those houses are built there, can the owners of those houses come back and sue you and your planning group for allowing those houses to be built there as negligence for them losing their livelihood, all of their investment, and their houses that were built on that industrial zone property that's been that way for, what, I don't know, 50 years, 100 years. So what is the liability of the city on that issue? Now, here's what I propose as a paralegal student, I propose that the island have a island-wide density ordinance that will control the whole big picture. If you have an ordinance that controls all of the whole island for density, you won't have all this overdevelopment. You won't have all the overbuilding, you won't have all the overcrowding, and you won't have the demand for a police station out here that we don't have. We don't have a county station, we don't have a city police station. I used to walk my German Shepherd down River Road to run off the burglars and the crackheads from Harvard Drive, which still is a problem. The county cops spend all their time driving around. You don't have money for, Al Cannon said he doesn't have money for a police station out here. No money. Where's all the property tax the cars going to? So what would a major countywide ordinance do for our island to stop the development? And why can't it be put into effect here? It has been in Colorado and other places.
Well, thank you. I mean, you do have the distinction between the city and the county, and we both have zoning, and so the properties that are in the county, you gotta look to the county on how they zone it, and you gotta look to the city when the property's in the city. We don't have the consolidated government that someone asked about, so you gotta deal with the two different jurisdictions. I mean, that's just the way it is on making zoning changes.
Van, I would like to say, we do have a county comprehensive plan that was put in place in 1999, 2000. And everybody with the county and the city says you can't change zoning, but the county did it. Everything on Johns Island was zoned 3 houses to the acre. They changed it. Some of the county is R4, which means 4 houses to the acre. Some of it's 1 house per 8 acres. So the county does have a comprehensive plan. It's being redone by the county this year. They're working on it. So there is a county comprehensive plan. We all need to stay on top and go to the meetings when the county starts holding meetings. But I want to say this, and this will really scare y'all. I'm going to throw some numbers out there. The mayor said 4,000 houses. I'm on the water company board, as is Rich Thomas back here, and I think that's the only other members we have here, the water company board. We have requests for... Oh yeah, where's Isaac's on the board also. We have requests in both the county and the city from developers for 67 and 12 taps, I think it is right now. And talking about the county comprehensive plan, several years ago, county councilman asked then county planning director Dan Pinnick if he could figure out how many houses could be built on Johns Island. Dan later said he regretted coming up with these figures because then that county council person used it to say why we need 526. But Dan's staff came up with a figure of under current county and city zoning, just figuring the zoning, not figuring anything as wetlands or anything in conservation easements. They come up with figures that said 35,000 houses could be built on Johns Island. Our population is somewhere between 20 and 40 right now. You get 35,000 houses with 4 people per house. That's 140,000 people on Johns Island. You think we got gridlock now?
Gee, thanks. Robert Speziale. You're in a tough place because all government officials always have people that were before them that they have to live with whatever they've done. But what I'd like to impress upon you are 3 things. One, it seems like we have silos, which I've lived with in business for years. So we have the county, we have the city, and the state. It seems to me that somebody needs to drive the connectivity between the silos. I'd like to think we can count on you for that.
That's
on
what
our
I'm
behalf.
supposed to do. I've listed off the names of the
So that's my
people
charge.
that I'm including, and I'm inviting them all to gather and not just to have a single meeting, but to have a process in place. So yes, sir.
Second, having come from the business world, I know that a plan is history the day it is printed. And it is basically out of date. So what troubles me is 2 things were said today. A plan from 1999 and a plan for 2008 in the year 2018. Who has the responsibility for updating and keeping current to Professor Dunstan's issues, whether or not they were included in the original plan? And I'll go to one thing that you said yourself. The original plan conceived of the 526 completion, which will not happen now. So that alone, amongst all other things, including hydrology, the climate change, and everything else that's going on, needs to be considered. So I ask you, sir, to dedicate someone to the commitment of reviewing the plan and bringing it up to date. That, it would seem to me, would be within your power.
It is. I can do that, at least for the city part of the territory. It's better to do it along with the county, and that's my intent.
And we'll be watching.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Mayor Mendel. I actually live in the county, but I have a quick question for the Johns Island plan. Is there anybody involved from Johns Island in that? Are there people now that are on a committee that are going to work with you from this point forward to update that? And if not, how will you go about including people from the island in the decisions that are made about us?
Right. Well, you've got a, when I reeled off the names of the folks I would like to include on this task force, it included community representatives from what I think they refer to as JICA, J-I-C-A, and then also Thomas's group here. But you also have elected officials like your city council member and your county council member. Yeah, I mentioned that. And in addition, somebody that represents the development community. They need a voice. They need a seat at the table as well. They have a big part of this outcome.
How many more people would like to ask the mayor a question? Raise your hand.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to add my thanks to you for coming out and speaking to us tonight. It really is important. We really do appreciate it. Just wanted to add a comment on to what Ms. Brandenburg said about this Oakville plantation and the linkage between the city and the county. So the city is considering putting in these 287, approving these 287 houses in this development. And it's a county road that is the only access. So it comes through our neighborhood and then it's a county road. County road that was underwater during Hurricane Irma, underwater during Hurricane Matthew, underwater during the October 15 floods, and now is beginning to be underwater on king tides. So, and we had a sinkhole in the road which took it down to one lane and took a couple of months maybe to get repaired. And so we add that number of cars traversing that road that's underwater. I think you're putting a lot of people in danger by approving that.
Well, thank you. So that gets back to the road that you need to work out an arrangement with the developer.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for coming. Number one, I kind of feel bad because I think you're starting to take a beating from us. But,
It's okay.
We're really not
I
bullies.
signed up for this job.
Yeah, but I think we just feel bullied. You know, we're not bullies. I know I do. I'm a lifetime resident of Johns Island, and when I'm sitting in traffic on Stone Oak Bridge, I'm either cussing or crying every day, at least 4 times a day. And the gentleman that was sitting here talking about a moratorium, Webster's definition, my favorite one is a suspension of activity. So my question is, could we please suspend activity of building on Johns Island? Because it's ridiculous. I mean, y'all, we're not prepared. You know, I mean, it's just, y'all didn't think it through. It wasn't thought through. And it's sad. I mean, obviously, the developers and the people that are in charge aren't from Johns Island. Not just live on Johns Island. There's a difference in being from Johns Island and living on Johns Island. And, you know, those of us that are from Johns Island, you know, you're killing us. You're killing our spirit. You know, and it's not right. It's just not right.
I hear you. There's a definition from Webster, but then, you know, you get lawyers involved, and then you do, from a fairness point of view, have to look at our development process and where someone is along in the process. So if they've already qualified for their permit and got their subdivision plan approved and all like that and had their plans, and they've gotten a permit, even if I had a moratorium, I can't stop them from building that house. They're entitled, they can build a house. You know, they've got the permit. So I mean, we had a lot of discussion at the city about where we could kind of put the hammer down to affect the stop, because we have to do it fairly to the property owners as well, and the development community. So it's quite a big balance beam. I know it's easy to think we can just stop, but it's just frankly more complicated than that. But we're trying. That's what we proposed was a moratorium. Thank you.
Obviously, we need to get the moratorium to go through, and we all need to be aware of how to be able to make that happen. When we get the moratorium, who is able to say, for example, Whitney Lakes, when new subdivisions build, they build another foot higher or 2 or 3 feet higher on the entire property than the neighbor behind them. So all the water and all the trees that used to suck the water goes to that property beside them. And those people no longer have their rights because they become puddles and pools, right? So how do we, and who is in charge of being able to tell the developers and the ordinances that they should have to have a certain amount of trees to collect and that they can't build higher than their neighbors so that all their neighborhood water now runs into their neighborhood? Who does that?
That's basically controlled by, if I'm correct, our stormwater requirements. And so when you develop a piece of property, you have to submit a plan to the city for our engineers approve it. If you're in the county, you got to submit it to the county. And there's supposed to be, you know, no negative impact to surrounding properties. And if there is, then
there is constantly, and the people who live in those neighborhoods aren't able to get any repercussions, you know, to respect what's happened to the property that they own. So actually, the people who've owned property here the longest are truthfully the people who are getting over and over and over less justice. So that needs to be something that we can directly point out of how do we get these ordinances changed so that we have more trees and things are built properly, and that not just the newest bidder gets the highest piece of property.
So over the next year, Doc and others here, I shared with you that this firm ACOM is reviewing all our stormwater standards, and there will be public meetings about that, and I want y'all to come and share your knowledge with them. I mean, you can change the requirements for stormwater, not just on Johns Island, but anywhere in the city, and we're very focused on trying to make it tougher for folks, and of course, I know over geologic time about Kiowa was under, where the ocean used to go out to Orangeburg or Columbia somewhere, and, you know, over time, sand dunes and things, you know, moved out to where they are now, and so you have those things, but there's not in place that I'm aware of a stormwater requirement that is based on the geology of the site. It has to do with how it drains off. And so I'm not saying what we got now is right or perfect. I'm wide open to science and hearing what we can do to make it better, but it's not something we just do at the drop of a coin.
No, but I would think now that we know that's a problem, you would stop allowing that to go forward.
Well, you know, you get back to the same issue as a moratorium. I get some new knowledge and I got to change the requirements. I can't stop somebody midstream.
Well, what's happening though is they're
You can't.
stealing from John's Island. They're stealing the ecology of John's Island and destroying it and leaving the money. When it's all done, they'll have a big pile of money and we'll have a destroyed island. You'll have a bigger flooding problem. And when that happens, we're going to come after you guys personally because you're making such outrageously egregious decisions.
And you say it's a good place to live, but it won't be for long. I mean, we've been there for 25 years, and the city doesn't seem to care a thing about the people who live here. And the way it's going now, your #1 rating in Condé Nast, you know, I mean, it's just not going to be a place people are going to want to come to.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
We're going to go to Tim, then this gentleman, and you got a quick question, Mary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for coming out to suffer these slings and arrows from the public. But
folks, if I didn't care, I wouldn't be here tonight.
Let me ask, can the city I know there's a lot of things that are going to be studied if this moratorium goes through, but can't we go ahead with things like forbidding development below 16 feet or 15 feet of sea level? Can we forbid the raising of the elevation of the land with development because of the runoff that's caused by it? I mean, that's not rocket science. That's simple stuff that decisions can already be made in the next opportunities.
Well, those are good suggestions, and we will consider raising the base floor elevation throughout the city. That's part of the same process that's undergoing right now. And we'll share with you when they have a public meeting. But, you know, we already require more than what FEMA and the federal government tells us is needed. We're a foot above what FEMA requires, and so we're considering taking it higher, and I personally think that's a good idea. You know, and over the next year, I think we'll get consensus on some of those things. I'll be honest with you, I hadn't put a lot of thought, it hadn't come to my attention until Dr. Dunson brings up about the condition of the geology and the replacement strata or fill that's put back down, and I bet that we have some requirements about such things, but I'm going to find out, I can tell you that.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you again for being here tonight. It's late, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come out. It shows that at least you're willing to listen, but I think you've seen a lot of concern about the future, not next year, the year after, but the next 10, 15, 20 years and beyond for this island, by people who live here, who were born and raised here, people who are come here, so been here half their adult life, but not forever. And I think that there's a lot of work that needs to get done. So one of the things that we heard was about traffic. We've heard about flooding and runoff, storm issues. We've also heard a little bit about developers' rights and zoning. And one of the things that the current city zoning for residential, the lowest density is RR1, which is 3.5 homes per acre or units per acre, which doesn't seem like much. And then there's light industrial. That mandates that the developer in good faith is going to do the best thing for the land, much in line with what Dr. Dustin had to say earlier, which is that Johns Island's unique. It's not like the topography of a lot of the other parts of the low country, or a lot of the parts of Charleston within the city. So you have sort of the rolling swales, you have flooding areas that you can see. If you drive anywhere around this island, you're going to see where the lots have been built up, and the surrounding communities, people with homes that are probably 50 years old, are, you know, common sense that they're going to get flooded out. So one consideration, is there a way to have another zoning option for this community that does put the onus on the developer not to stick as many homes into a piece of land off of Maybank Highway or off of River Road as they can to make as much money as they can, because it's business, we all know that, that's what they want, but something that's going to be more in line with what the future of this community should look like and protect us from traffic and flooding and stormwater runoff and other things that are going to be detrimental to the people who are already living here.
Good comment. Again, it takes real
All right, we're going to take
My wife is sharing with me that if y'all want to come to our next council meeting and at least participate in citizens participation. Normally we meet on Tuesdays, but I got invited and it was somewhat required that the mayor participate for us to get this grant for workforce development. So I'm going to be out of town, and we're going to have our next meeting on Monday, the 26th, just in case any of y'all want to come to city council.
We're going to ask two quick questions here. Christina's going live. She's going to ask a quick question, and then I think we got one more on that side of the room. Then I know it's hot in here, people.
It is warm. Mr. Mayor, I'm asking a question that's off of the live feed from Facebook. They're asking.
I love Facebook.
So do I.
Can you believe that?
Thomas and I are a little bit of babysitters for Facebook with a couple pages and groups that we run. I am asking to ask you, what is the city plans for another station with the growth of houses that are being built for Charleston County? With St. John's running most of the calls for the city's jurisdiction anyway.
For another station, like a fire station?
For another fire station, yes.
So, of course, when we look at population, we're mostly thinking about the folks that are in the city limits. But this effort going forward about including the county and St. John's Fire District as well ought to be included to think about where stations go. But to answer the question directly,
The county does run.
we've been looking already in the vicinity of Maybank and River Road to be the WISE's next location for consolidated fire and police stations, since our existing station is, over on Bohicket.
A consolidated city and county courthouse?
No, just
Oh,
just consolidate our own police and fire
So
in
the
one
county won't be
station
running
like
those
we
for the
did over
city.
on Daniel
Right.
Island. All right. So thank you all for coming out, and I
Got two questions.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm the one who spoke at your city council meeting and said that I think Johns Island deserves the moratorium. It deserves the research project like you did in West Ashley. And I want to make that understood, but I think people need to understand, even if we get a moratorium, that does not stop any of the construction that is now approved. People can finish what they're doing on their property. It just stops anything new from happening.
Absolutely.
Okay? But have you ever been to Defusky Island? And I'm going to steal this from Dr. Dunstan, because I heard him say this.
I've wanted to go there.
You need to ride down there. They have the best buildings in the state because they didn't raise the land up. They built the houses up. They left the natural flora under them. They don't have a flooding issue. There's something to think about. And the last thing is, you very politely said over there in all this development that this vision was kind of as creating the town of Johns Island. Would the city of Charleston be willing to give up control and allow for a town of Johns Island?
I'm gonna let you finish up on that one, Mayor.
Well, I view the city from a development and kind of geography point of view as being like 5 boroughs, as there are 5 boroughs in New York City. There are 5 boroughs in the city of Charleston. James Island, Johns Island, the Peninsula, West Ashley, and Daniel Island, Cainhoy. And they each have their own unique characteristics, and I believe each borough deserves its own attention, number one, and its own, even down to zoning, just like we did on Folly Overlay District, is different from what we had in every other borough in the city when we took a closer look at what was appropriate for James Island. And I think that's possible on Johns Island as well. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. It should be respectful of what you've got, and it should, it can be unique. But I would make the statement that I'm very proud of overall of the city of Charleston, of our history and our people and the direction that we're going in. And I love this city, and I view Johns Island as one of those important boroughs of our city.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for being here with us tonight. As y'all know, Bill's already left. Bill will leave at 8 o'clock. Doesn't matter where we finish meeting or not, he leaves at 8 o'clock. Isaac, thank you once again for sticking around. And I know everybody's probably got some more questions for the mayor and Dr. Dunstan and all, but we're going to ease out of the building so Isaac can lock up. I once again want to thank the church. We are planning a fundraiser, kind of a cultural thing, a Heritage Festival fundraiser in the future to raise some money for the church here, because you'll notice their building fund right out front, by the front door. This is a beautiful facility, but it costs them a lot of money. They're not scrimping on the electric bill right now, although they can always use help with the electric bill. One of the units is down, that's why it's so hot. But it's also a good reason for us to get out of here. And everybody give the mayor a hand. Thank you. We will be here again in March, the 19th of March, 3rd Monday. Thank you all.